Today from Chicago, I have Derrek Hull, who's the CEO of the Trotter Project. Derrek, thank you for being on the show.
Jensen, thanks so much for having me today on this Friday.
I'm grateful to be able to speak with you. I've been a big fan of your work for a lot of years now. And then to see what you're doing in this moment is unbelievably inspiring and incredibly difficult, I'm sure. So we'll get into that. But take us back 6 years now when the Trotter Project started. What was really the mission and why was it so important for you to begin this organization?
Sure. Wow. I mean, thinking about it, 6 years ago, as of April 23rd of just earlier this month, or of last month, I think, right? We're on May 1st.
Hey,
time's going flying by. It's hard to keep track. But yeah, 6 years ago, we got a group of chefs together. Charlie Trotter had just recently passed away, and there was a candlelight vigil that was hosted outside of Charlie Trotter's restaurant in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. And when people are mourning loss, of anyone, and of course, immeasurable impact of Charlie Trotter. What a legacy, right? And people were saying outside on that famous street, Armitage, outside of the restaurant, saying, what can we do to continue and honor this extraordinary innovator, and humanitarian's good work? And so as anyone has the best and most honest of intentions, they put good plans in place. And then, of course, life gets in your way, personally and professionally. And however, there's one particular individual who did not let that go away, that conversation. And that was a good friend of mine, a Charlie Trotter's restaurant alumni, Hamaro Cantu, who had Michelin-starred Moto restaurant right here in Chicago. And so he had a meeting, which I was part of, right in his Moto lab there in Chicago's West Fulton Market District. And there were members of Charlie Trotter's family. There was Sari Worsham, who was really like the right-hand person for so many of the 25 years that Charlie Trotter's restaurant was open, helping produce Charlie Trotter's kitchen sessions with Charlie Trotter and PBS, writing all of his cookbooks that many people look to still to this day, and pitch this idea of how can we be of service, and what can we do to not only just honor Charlie Trotter's legacy, but truly continue the good work that he paved the way for. And so didn't know it back then in Moto Lab during that day that was the start of what is today, 6 years later, the Trotter Project. And I've got to tell you, we didn't know what we were doing. We had a group of 5 people who are the co-founding board members. We had Ann Trotter Hindkamp, Scott Trotter. These are both siblings of Charlie Trotter's, who to this day, and since day one, literally, who were in that Moto Lab, there to create something. And I got Chef Hamaro Cantu turned to me during one of the then board meetings, the founding board meetings, and I was really serving as marketing communications, person for the Trotter Project at that point in time. And he looked up at me, and I was, serving as marketing person, secretary, a jack of all trades, right? And so he said, Derrek, the board has talked, and we'd like to nominate you as our first full-time executive director. And I looked at him, Jensen, and I said, so could you spell Derrek for me? Because I was just so in the zone of taking the notes. And he said, well, it's however you spell your name.
It's your name.
So I was just completely floored by it, because Charlie Trotter to me was not just a great chef and an innovator. I've always known him since my early days when I started working for then Chicago Mayor Daley, and the grande dame of culture herself here in Chicago, who brought cows on parade, those fiberglass cows that started in Chicago and then across the rest of all the major cities, and they did their variation of fiberglass, things that were significant. And so I knew Charlie, in that way, of somebody who was a big thinker, was always thinking 3 steps ahead of everybody else. And and was also somebody who invited underserved youth from areas of Chicago's underserved food desert areas of the city to invite them over to the studio kitchen at 814 West Armitage, prepare an epically delicious meal for those young people. But then he had his staff, the alumni today, go around the room and give examples of service and excellence and the importance of giving back to community, small and large. And so that's what I always knew about Charlie Trotter, was the humanitarian and the big thinker, and always looking for ways to give back to others. And so 6 years ago, when the Trotter Project started, our mission is still very clear to this day. We provide education, mentorship to youth who have a real passion, but may not have the economic opportunities to go into culinary and hospitality management schools. And so that's how we really started it out. We started out with 2 culinary and hospitality management schools here in Chicago, giving full and partial ride scholarships to the City Colleges of Chicago's only culinary school, Washburn, on the far south side of Chicago, and also to Kendall College. And as of today, we have students, culinary and hospitality management students, all around the country who are attending Johnson & Wales, CIA in Hyde Park, and then community and state universities that also have culinary and hospitality management programs. We thought it was really important that, you don't just get to the students at the high school level. We want to make sure that we educate and empower young kids to understand the importance of food, because food, for so many of the communities that we serve, it brings hope, right? And it's one of the most basic needs. And so how do you educate and empower people from a very young age? And so we started taking that longitudinal thread, if you will, Jensen. We started looking at it and going, how can we start with younger kids, getting them excited and empowering them through education about where their food comes from, and then how to grow that food. And then once they've grown that food, we have chefs who come in that support the Trotter Project to go, okay, now, the littles, as we call the kids, from pre-K through, 4th grade, okay, you've grown that carrot, you've grown that potato. Here are the ways to slice and dice it. Here are the ways that you can prepare it to make a meal for yourself. Because if you teach a kid how to grow their food, you teach them, what to do with that food, they're feeding themselves, they're feeding their families, and they're feeding their communities. And so it becomes a vehicle of empowerment and fortitude. And so it's been really exciting. We just last year morphed into expanding our service pillar. And so we linked up with the University of Illinois Extension Program, teamed up with the Museum of Science and Industry. Again, these are great cultural and educational institutions, not only here in Chicago, but in the state of Illinois and the Midwest. And, the Museum of Science and Industry is well known worldwide. And I walked into the school one day, Jensen, about 2 years ago, and I was with our Pillars of Excellence program manager, Lakeisha Dunn, who is she's really the spirit and the heart of the Trotter Project, right? As crazy as my brain is, I'm the person, I guess, who is always stuck in my brain and coming up with these moonshot ideas, as crazy as they may be. And you've got Paula Hood, with our team. She actually worked the front lines, at Charlie Trotter's for a number of years. And she's our operations person. So she's really the skeleton and the muscle that keeps the Trotter Project going. And Keisha, as we affectionately call her, who comes again from these types of neighborhoods and really knows these people and the issues and challenges that they have. She's that heart and that spirit. And so Keisha and I toured a school in Englewood. And, to talk about Englewood, just to give you a sense of it, it's on the far south side of Chicago. It is one of those areas that unfortunately deals with, there's huge swaths of land, and yet they're underutilized, right? They don't have access to, as you and I would, to walk out of the house to, 5 or 10 minutes and you're at a grocery store that has fresh produce and whatnot, or to get in the car and only 15, 20 minutes away is a supermarket or a bodega that has fresh produce. And so toured the school with the administrators, with Rita Nolan, who is the executive director, and then at the time was the principal of the Montessori School of Englewood. And we toured all parts of the school. We toured from, the school was at that time pre-K through 7th grade. They just added on an 8th grade class, but we went to the lunch area, and each classroom from pre-K through 1st grade on up to 7th grade at that point in time, was wondering why the kids were kind of elbowing their way to the front of the line. And without fail, Jensen, 1 or 2 of the kids would come out in tears because they didn't have a meal. Because for whatever reason, the food wasn't counted accurately. And I thought by April of that particular year, you should know how many kids are in each of the classrooms, right? And and Rita Nolan and Tom Hale, who is an incredible superhuman himself, said this is unfortunately a common occurrence. And so we thought, how do we at the Trotter Project bring visibility to the invisible? And so I opened my mouth without knowing where the money was going to come from, knowing the money wasn't there. And I said, we're going to help feed these kids. And we saw a vacant parking lot area outside the school that had started to become somewhat of a garden space with a meditative, center for kids to just be able to reflect on those who they've lost to gun violence or any, other common things that happen in those areas. And I said, we're going to build a garden here. Again, Jensen didn't know where the money was going to come from. I'm not a gardener. I have a brown thumb, if not worse. And we said we were going to do that. And I mentioned it to the board, and we've got some great board members who are not just well-intentioned individuals, but they really live the heart of the mission. And Ann Rashford, who heads up special exhibitions at the Museum of Science and Industry, she's affectionately referred to by me and many others through the Trotter Project as Lady Rashford. She is quite a refined individual, deeply connected, very soft-spoken and humble. I wish, Jensen, I had the humble gene, but I do practice gratitude like a champion, right? As much as my mother always said, Derrek, you need to be more humble. I don't have the humble gene, but I do practice gratitude like a hero. But Ann Rashford is the embodiment of just selfless humility. And she said, Derrek, I want to help you. I have some ideas. And a few months went by, and she said, I need you to be patient. I do not have the patience gene, especially when I want to help people and I know that it's the right thing to do. We just got to figure it out. And so she called me a few months later and she said, I have the perfect thing for us. The University of Illinois Extension Program has a Chicago Master Gardeners initiative. And the Master Gardeners are not going to be able to continue their work due to some construction issues at the Museum of Science and Industry's Smart Home. And she said, however, they need to keep their accreditation. And what if we were to have the University of Illinois Extension Chicago Master Gardeners partner up with the Trotter Project and the Montessori School of Englewood? So that's how we got started. We had seedlings donated, we had seeds donated, we had topsoil, mulch, wood chips, all of that. We got all the wood that we needed to build these raised beds. And by the middle of summer, we had the kids still out there growing the food. In fact, it was one of the kids' ideas because there is so much homelessness in Englewood and there's so much food insecurity. A group of the older classmen and women, they came up with the idea of coming up with a box that any food, any produce that they picked that the school was not using in the Trotter Project's Farm to Classroom project, that they would put that in the box and it would say free food. And so that was the kids' idea. So you have that spirit again of giving back that started with Charlie Trotter, that continued on with the Trotter Project, and now you've got it with the kids. And so we get the call, a few months later. And keep in mind, this was a vacant parking lot that just back in that January and February earlier of last year. And by the summer, we were growing cherry tomatoes and carrots and whatnot. And I was talking with one of the littles who was in the first grade, and he said, Derrek, he goes, Mr. Derrek, he goes, there's grasshoppers and butterflies. And I said, yes. And I go, are butterflies good or are they bad? And he goes, they're great. And here you have a 6 or 7 year old. He goes, because they're pollinators, Jensen. And he said, and they help the vegetables grow. And so that to me was really inspiring, that we have these kids who, again, as I said earlier on when we started, they're learning where their food comes from. They're being educated and empowered, working with the master gardeners from U of I. They're working with their teachers to learn how to grow that food. And then you get chefs who come in and say, now we're going to teach you how to cook that food. Yeah. So we got a call from the city of Chicago, from the Water Reclamation Department. And the commissioner identifies, as they do every year, a group of community gardens, and they award them the Chicago Gardening and Excellence Award. And they said the Trotter Project at the Montessori School of Englewood with U of I and Museum of Science and Industry, you're awarded one of these. We applaud the work that you've done. And so that was very fulfilling, because remember, 2 years prior, I opened my big mouth and didn't have anybody to assist us, didn't know where the money was coming from. And within less than 6 months' time, we had a thriving garden. And so we called that movement the farm to classroom movement. We had people such as Farmer Lee Jones, very dear friend and supporter to the Trotter Project, very close friends with Charlie Trotter over many, many years of the restaurant being open. In fact, Charlie utilized much of his amazing produce in those meals and dishes that he created during the time that Charlie Trotter's was open. So it's fulfilling in many, many ways to know that has happened. A lot of people came to us and said, we need to build a fence around the garden because there's some theft. And, Keisha and I said, no, we don't want to build a fence. We want to build a bridge to the community. And so we invited members of the community. We just put up an invitation on the Trotter Project's Facebook page and said, we'd like any and all people who are willing to do a community planting day with us to be a part of that community planting day. And since that day, Jensen, you have people around the neighborhood, the neighbors who guard and protect the garden space. Oh. They come out there and work on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays with the U of I Chicago Master Gardeners to pick the weeds, water the produce. And so it's really everybody in the boat, a true holistic community effort on the part of all of Chicago. And we're just immensely grateful for all of those people who do that.
Wow. Derrek, your energy is infectious. Unbelievable.
Imagine being quarantined since March 11th in my house. I'm doing what we're going to talk about, what we're currently doing with COVID-19. I know in a bit, but it's all being done from my couch, basically.
Yeah, right, and to have that central hub to be able to get that out there. What's interesting is you can't touch all the mechanisms that you touch usually, but having this level of energy and ability to communicate is going to be clearly very, very important. So there's a couple things I wanted to unpack with what you said. First of all, the fact that you call them littles and that they are so thoughtful about the way that they are building their own community is absolutely, if people don't take anything else away from this, know that the littles in your community have the depth of ability to have an impact right now on their community. They don't have to be adults. So I really appreciate that. And talking about Mauro Cantu was really great, because a few years back, I got invited to the International Chef Congress out in Brooklyn from Star Chefs, and he hosted an event, Trotter Project, and all the chefs that cooked there were former Trotter alum.
Yeah.
And, the Trotter siblings and family were there, and it was unbelievable the energy that was in that place. It was really palpable. So you could just feel that still that ingenuity, that big thinking, that creativity is alive and well through all of the littles and all of the chefs that have been a part of that community. So that was something I wanted to point out. And now thinking about what's happening today. So you have this very clear mission, and now you're pivoting like everybody else, trying to find a way, but the mission is still crystallized. You are still serving your community. How now is that playing out today? And then talk about some of the amazing humans that are involved in the process of feeding thousands of people. And first, tell us about 22 pallets of yogurt, because it's just crazy.
Oh yeah, I had my phone here just a minute ago, so I was looking. In fact, actually, I'm getting a text message from one of the community engagement folks from United Airlines. United Airlines, not to plug them in an ad way, they're really unsung heroes in the way that they don't like to talk too much about all the good that they do behind the scenes, but they are the Trotter Project's founding corporate sponsor. And we're so appreciative to those amazing human beings at United, because, they took a chance on us before we were even an official 501c3. They said, we love what you are setting out to do. Charlie Trotter is synonymous with Chicago. He's a hometown, iconic chef. This is our hometown as well. And so, United, it continues to amaze us in so many different ways. And, just today, as in many of the days over these recent weeks, got a call from them and said, we've got 22 pallets of yogurt. Do you have a doc? Because we've got 22 pallets of yogurt. And so I'm adding, Jensen, to my repertoire of skill sets, supply chain management. So I've got, after I get off this with you, I've got to figure out how we're going to get 22 pallets of yogurt over to the kids, the littles, at the Montessori School of Englewood.
But wow, they're going to have a lot of probiotic action going on from all that yogurt.
We do.
That just encapsulates how you just have to figure shit out. Like, it's so in the hospitality industry to find a way to connect with people, to have those moments of hospitality, and those look different all the time. And in this moment, it looks like 22 pallets of yogurt. So I really appreciate that. All right, talk about actually practically, how are you guys delivering thousands of meals? What's the mechanism now that is bringing all that food to people?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, so we've got 4 pillars. They range everything from scholarship, internship, mentorship, and service. And we thought, what's the one thing? If I learned anything in my master's program, and it was an expensive lesson to learn, Jensen, it's what's the one thing that you can do that can make everything else unnecessary or easier to do? And so you can't, with all priorities being equal during this COVID-19 crisis, you can't practically and effectively balance them all. And so the Trotter Project team, we took a look at and said, which of the 4 pillars are we going to lean into, and are we going to lean into hard? And so we're leaning into our service pillar. So this is not we're not creating any evolution here or revolution. We're just reformulating something that currently exists within the mission. And so the service pillar, really tasks the Trotter Project and those who support us with creating a sustainable, level of events that are fundraising that provide service to community, small and large. And so we thought, let's just lean into the community service aspect of it. We know, in communities all across the country, COVID-19 is hitting them in extraordinary ways, right? But with the food insecure populations that the Trotter Project is in, on the far west and south sides of Chicago, there is issues of food insecurity, there's issues of homelessness, there's issues of violence, and whatnot, and access to, education. And so, COVID-19 is just one more thing, unfortunately, to add to their pile of challenges, right? And so we thought, during this extraordinary time, and our service pillar, how can we take a meal off of their plate of worry. And so we teamed up, with the Montessori School of Englewood. They basically turned that school into a meal pantry distribution point. They've kept themselves open as teachers are continuing to engage the students on an educational basis. The operations and administrative team and community volunteers, they are looking at it as a meal distribution space. And so thought, how we don't have a lot of money, but what can we do? And so we put $20,000 of our existing scholarship fund for 2020 into this. We donated $10,000 to the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation, specifically to their Restaurant Employee Relief Fund. Now we know that's $10,000, but that's zero of zero of zero. So $10,000 we know will help. I'm proud to say, not because of our small donation, but because of so many people, that Restaurant Employee Relief Fund through the NRAEF now stands at $10 million, and 60,000 restaurant employees have filed for $500 gifts back to them, just to keep them sustainable. The other $10,000 that I mentioned out of that 20, we mobilized by working with some partner chefs and said, can you, for a price point between $8 to $12 per meal, they have to be individually packaged grab-and-go meals because we have to follow the CDC guidelines, right? So as less human contact on the food as possible while wearing PPE. The chefs have to wear the gloves, they have to wear the mask, and they have to keep all of the standard sanitation protocols in place. But now you've got to double that effort. But we know that you can't have a buffet style meal being served because of possible transmission. And so we said to the chefs, can you get individually packaged grab-and-go meals? And so we teamed up with 50/50 Restaurant Group, which is just an incredible group of people. Scott Weiner and his team of chefs at 50/50 Restaurant Group. It's a natural fit for us to have started working with them. They, through Roots Pizza, which is one of their restaurants in the 50/50 Restaurant Group, they have been working with us for well over a year and featuring our scholars. Again, as I mentioned, those kids who go through our culinary and hospitality management through college and universities, they come back to Chicago looking and needing jobs. And so we had Nia Spencer, who is one of our first culinary scholars. She is being educated at Monroe College in New York City, comes back for the summer, paired up with Chef Martine, and did a collaborative Roots Pizza Trotter Project pizza that's been featured on their menu, and a portion of the proceeds go back to the Trotter Project. And what's extraordinary about Nia is she's an underdog in so many ways. She's hearing impaired. And so as you can imagine, chefs have to have all of their senses with people yelling and barking orders and, things in a kitchen. And here's someone who doesn't have one of her senses. And yet she is just crushing it like just a superhuman, right? And so it was a natural fit for us to start working with 50/50 Restaurant Group in creating those grab-and-go meals. Another group that we started working with is Feast and Imbibe with Heather Bublik and Chef DeAndre Carter. Now, Chef DeAndre Carter and Heather both worked at Moto Restaurant. They met at Moto Restaurant. Chef DeAndre Carter comes from the far South Side. He unfortunately lost his brother to gun violence on the South Side. And he would take 2 trains and 3 buses to get from the far South Side to work for free in an internship program at Moto Restaurant. And then, of course, eventually got a job there. And, so they were a natural fit for us. They had just lost, sadly, prior to COVID-19, their newborn child. And you would think, Jensen, that people dealing with the loss of a newborn child like that, they would be focused on the mourning, and the loss of that. These 2 unsung superheroes did not stop. What they did was, they took it very personally, COVID-19, because they have Soul and Smoke Restaurant and they have Feast and Imbibe catering company up in Evanston, Illinois, where Northwestern University is based. And what they did was they mobilized. They said, we're not allowed to gather. So all of our catering business is completely gone. And I said, could you guys create some individually packaged grab and go meals? And we have been partnering with 50/50, with Dynamic Hospitality Restaurant Group, with Feast and Imbibe, with Chef DeAndre and his team. And we've been doing, 100, 200 meals here and there. And then I get the call from Jose Andres' team at World Central Kitchen. Nobel Peace Prize nominated Jose Andres.
No big deal.
Just like, I have no words when you think about that. Chef Jose Andres and Chef Charlie Trotter were very close friends. They were contemporaries, obviously. And we were invited, the Trotter Project. I think this is a little known fact that North Americans don't know, and that we need to celebrate more so, not just Chicagoans or Midwesterners. There is an awards program called the Science and Cooking Awards through the World Congress out of Barcelona. And the University of Barcelona had paired up with Harold McGee, the rock star who he is, Harold McGee, and David Weitz out of Harvard University. And with Harvard and the University of Barcelona, they host this semi-annual Science and Cooking World Congress. And I got a call from a woman who works with San Pellegrino's World's 50 Best, who was very close with Chef Amaro Cantu. And I was in a meeting with some C-suite executives. And needless to say, my WhatsApp, my Instagram, my cell phone ringing and text messages from this particular individual were just ringing, just coming in inundated nonstop. I finally said, I have to take this call. This is very important, I'm sure. And so this is back in January of last year. And very breathless, in broken English, she said, Derrek, it's so good to connect with you. She said, we need you and Chef Amaro Cantu's widow and young daughters, to come to Barcelona for the Science and Cooking World Congress. We are inviting all of the past Spheric Awards, and it's SFERIC Awards, to come back and celebrate them. And I said, so who won this? And she said, well, Chef Amaro Cantu for the edible menu. And that's specifically what he won it for. I go, who else has won one of these awards? And she started rattling off Jensen names like Ferran Adria, Juan Roca of Tickets, and Heston Blumenthal, and all of these, rock star elite chefs in Europe. And, keep in mind, I was the former marketing communications person at Moto Restaurant. I'm thinking, Omar, as we affectionately refer to Cantu, I'm like, why didn't I know about this? Yeah. So we hopped on a plane, not knowing what to expect. And so the chefs from Spain are very near and dear to our hearts. Chef Charlie Trotter was the first chef in North America to invite Ferran Adria to come to the United States. So there's a lot of synergies here, right? And, and with Jose Andres, I was invited to come to Harvard, where he spoke to a group, as they do. They have an annual science cooking and science lecture series, and he was hosting the last one of the year in 2019, and it was they were celebrating their 10-year anniversary. And Chef Andres is just an absolute inspiration to so many, right? And he's a hero to so many. And so to get that call to see how World Central Kitchen could partner up with Chicago's legendary hometown chef, right, of Charlie Trotter's nonprofit, the Trotter Project. Again, I didn't really think too much before I said, yes, we'll just figure it out as we go along. And so in just in a few weeks' time, talking to you as of today, we ramped up those meals from 100 meals to 200 meals and whatnot. Talked to the World Central Kitchen's representatives on a Saturday. Again, time's eluding me right now, but by Tuesday of that same week, right? So less than 3 or 4 days, we had mobilized chefs to provide 200 meals. And by Thursday, Jensen, of that same week, we were already up from 200 meals to 800 meals that were being delivered from the Montessori School of Englewood. We, as of today, have served over 5,000 individually packaged grab-and-go meals. It's so people are always asking me, how can we help? And it's an indelicate thing to say, knowing that so many Americans are out of jobs right now. You certainly do not want to be taxing the restaurant workers because many of them are hit hard and are out of jobs. And so the normal community that we go to ask to help us to educate and mentor our students, we're finding ways how we can help them. And so we're utilizing the Trotter Project COVID-19 Relief Fund to do two things. First, to help employ restaurant workers. At the same time, those restaurant workers, the food that they're preparing is going to feed hungry individuals and families, in the far south side and far west side of Chicago. But we have had people really step up to the plate in extraordinary ways through individual donations, through a major donation just as of this week from Bank of America, as well as Archer Daniel Midlands, which is pretty much the supermarket to the world, right? Donating tens of thousands of dollars to the Trotter Project COVID-19 Relief Fund. People are asking if they have any ability to do so, whether it's $1 or it's $5 or $50 or whatever they can do, just donate to the Trotter Project COVID-19 Relief Fund. And knowing that 100% of your donation is going to go to pay restaurant workers to create those individually packaged grab-and-go meals that are then going to feed the hungry, individuals and families, not only here in Chicago, but in Boston and Los Angeles. And what's unique about why Boston and Los Angeles is that is where our mission was expanding in 2020, where we were going to expand our education initiatives, expand our farm to classroom initiatives, but we have had to hit pause because of COVID-19. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be teaming up with the food banks, just like we are here with the Greater Chicago Food Depository, but the Boston Food Bank and the LA Food Bank, and identifying chefs, because there are so many great chefs who have supported us in those cities, that we have the funds now because of Bank of America and ADM and others, that we're going to be able to expand beyond Chicago and to help even more people. And we're not stopping at the May 15th or at the end of this month. We're going to continue to do this for as long as the funds are there.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. So I put the website up. We'll make sure that people get linked up to that so they can donate. If I'm a chef, restaurateur, a line cook, a server, anything that wants to get involved, that wants to support the cause, because they are hurt as much. I mean, you've seen the numbers. Potentially 25% of people filing for unemployment are in the hospitality industry. It's unbelievable how decimated, yet in the same breath of saying, I need help, they say, where can I donate my time and go and cook? So if I'm a chef, a restaurant, how can I get involved? Is there a way to connect to?
It's timely that we're talking to you today, because just as of early next week, you can go to thetrotterproject.org. We are going to have a sign-up page for chefs and restaurants that are looking to provide these individually packaged grab-and-go meals. And I want to be clear to people, we're not asking them to donate their time, right? We understand restaurants are hit so hard that we're going to pay these chefs and restaurants to put those meals together. So we know it's just a drop in the bucket, but restaurants are so generous to so many people in our communities. It's time for us as charities and for individuals to step up and help them at this time.
It's unbelievable work. It's so important. And the sense of community is really emanating from there. And I'm not surprised that Jose Andres and World Central Kitchen reach out to you and all the other organizations. I mean, I'll show you. Usually I scribble a couple notes. I have an entire page of everybody that you mentioned. I'm writing in the margins right now.
I'm a talker. I apologize.
It could not be any better. I want everybody to know that this show and our hospitality industry is about acknowledgement. And so the fact that you are acknowledging so many people, that it takes a village. Like, you are an amazing speaker. And so, again, infectious, spreading positivity. We're going to take those words and own them for sure. Yet it takes hundreds and hundreds of people and organizations and so many organizations giving money and their time, their effort, their infrastructure, whatever it might be. So I appreciate that you kind of laid it out for us, that it's not a singular focus, but it's so deep in its impact across the community. So I appreciate it. And I want to end with some playlist items, because whatever you listen to in the morning, Derrek, to get you going, we all need a little bit of that. But tell us a couple maybe playlist items, something you're listening to, watching, reading, that it keeps you inspired.
So I got to be careful because, Alexa, she's listening right now. But the things that keep me right now, I'm listening to a lot of Bon Iver because I'm at a real heightened state of turning into a supply chain management ninja, right? So I need things that are a little bit more settling to me. So I'm listening to a lot of Bon Iver at the moment. I'm listening to the 1975, those are just two. And then of course I'm a huge Depeche Mode nut. So I actually just got one of their masks, one of their cloth masks that I ordered. So it has the covers from each of their albums on it. So every day I'm waiting for UPS to buzz the condo buzzer here. So those are three just off the top of my head that I'm listening to on a daily basis.
That's really great. And we were both joking beforehand how we have cookbooks stacked up to have our laptops a little bit higher. Show everyone the book that didn't fit because it was a little too.
Yeah, it didn't make the cut to keep my laptop up here. So I don't have 4 chins, so I just have 2 when I normally have 5. But this book is an inspiration, and it's oddly I was just grabbing things off my shelf, right? And it's Lessons in Service by Charlie Trotter. It's too small, so the laptop would have fallen off of it. But this book doesn't need to be small because it's mighty in what it teaches.
It is perfect. Derrek Hull, thank you so much for the energy. I'm fired up. I really appreciate it. The community appreciates it. You're setting a great example and roadmap for the hospitality industry across the country. So thank you for your time. Now, go figure out what to do with those pallets of yogurt, my friend.
22 pallets of yogurt, yes.
All right, Derrek, have a great day.
Thanks, Jensen. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Wow, that was some serious energy. The boy can talk, and it is, again, infectious. We need that kind of energy around right now because it's easy to go up and down in these moments. But Derrek Hull will not let anybody be in the dumps for long, I'm sure, because he is absolutely fired up. Appreciate the leadership, the communication, the energy again. So Trotter Project, thetrotterproject.org. Go donate, especially if Chicago means something to you, and look out for Boston and LA, as well as they're having a sign-up sheet. So make sure and go check that out as well. If you are a restaurant that wants to get involved, and I know so many do because we want to get back in the fight, so to speak, it's in us in the hospitality industry to be of service, the purest form of hospitality, just taking care and feeding your community. So grateful to Derrek Hull and the Trotter Project for taking some time with us. Tune back in about 20 minutes. I'm going to have Janet Isabelli with Isabelli Partners, PR agency in Chicago and Miami. So we're spending some time in Chicago today. She's going to be on and talking a little bit about one of the Facebook groups that she begun, the Hospitality Industry Alliance, which has been a huge resource for me personally, a lot in the industry for just sharing information in this time, which is much, much needed. Tomorrow, we got 2 episodes. Debbie Salzberg from Just Forking Around podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about urban gardening. I'm very inspired by the work she's doing in that and just sharing some fun videos. That is at noon Mountain Time tomorrow, Saturday, and then 1 p.m. Mountain Time on Saturday. I have Paige Weiss, who's with Tree Ring Digital. We're going to talk a little bit about your digital customer journey, as that has become incredibly important for the hospitality industry, for the restaurant industry, and especially right now and coming out of this, the expectation is going to be that people can interact with you seamlessly from a digital standpoint, not just butts and seats. So very important. So tune into those. All right, I'll check back in with you a little bit. Cheers. Cheers to the littles. I love it.